Hello, this is a review of today's lesson for Monday, January 11th. Our learning goal is still the same as Friday, where we are looking to explain patterns in the number of zeros in the product when a whole number is multiplied by a power of 10, represent powers of 10 using whole number exponents. So on Friday, we really unpacked this learning objective and we focused in on words that we knew, like patterns, product, whole number, multiply, and we related those to our new vocabulary words like powers and exponents. All right, so this slide here we did on Friday, and everybody was asked to put this information in their notebooks. There's a picture of it on our Google Classroom under Friday. So again, if you need more information, go back to Friday and you will see today's notes. So what we talked about is how we can take 10 times 10 times 10, and we know that the product of 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000. Now, going back to old vocabulary words, we know that the numbers that we multiply together are called factors, and the answer is the product. So what's new with this lesson is that we could take this repeated multiplication problem and write it using powers. Because again, powers are a shortcut for repeated multiplication. So I'm going to see that I have the number 10 being repeated 3 times. So I'm going to write this as 10 to the third power, or 10 to the power of 3. Again, the 10, we would call that the base because it's the number that's being repeated. And the little 3 at the top we call the exponent. And it tells us how many times we are repeating our base. And that's what this final statement at the bottom says. It says the exponent is the number that tells how many times a base is used as a factor, meaning how many times are we repeatedly going to multiply that number. On Friday, the biggest connection that we were really trying to make, or the patterns that we were looking for, is that if I have 3 tens being multiplied, that means my product is going to have 3 zeros, and my exponent is a 3. All right, so taking a look at this next slide, again, this is a review from last week. And what I just talked about on the previous slide, make sure you are looking for these patterns. In this first example, I see that my standard form has 2 zeros, which means it's going to use 2 tens when written as a multiplication problem. And my exponent is a 2. So now taking a look at the second row, I have 1,000, and I'm going to use that to help me fill in the missing pieces. If I have 1,000, which is 3 zeros, that means I'm going to multiply 3 tens. And again, you can see that means that I could write that as 10 to the third power or 10 to the power of 3. The base 10 is the number that I'm repeating, and I repeated it 3 times. Taking a look at the next one, you can see that I have 4 zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4 tens. So the 10 is being repeated, and since we're repeating it 4 times, 10 to the 4th power. Finally, on this last example, you can see that they're giving us the multiplication problem, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tens, which means that I have the number 10 being repeated 5 times, so 10 to the 5th power, or 10 to the power of 5. If I multiply my basic facts, 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1, my number is going to start with a 1, and then I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for an answer of 100,000. Again, The connections that we're looking for is, as I went over in all of these examples, the number of zeros in the product is the same as the number of tens that we used, which is the same as the exponent. All right. So again, we did this slide on Friday and we focused in on the top three. In this example now, we're not going to focus in the top three. We're actually going to look at the rest of, so I'm going to scribble those out. We're actually going to look at the bottom part of this chart. So we can take this skill and advance it a little bit by incorporating other digits. So it says 6 times 10 to the second power. Well, what that means is, instead of saying 6 times 100, they just rewrote this in another way. So 6 times 10 to the second power is the same thing as saying 6 times 100, because we know that an exponent of 2 means 2 zeros. Well, I could write that again as 6 times, how many tens would I need? I would need 2 tens, 1, 2, because my exponent tells me I'm repeating 10 2 times. In my product or my final answer, that's like saying a 6 with 2 zeros. Again, that information that we were talking about where the patterns all go together, you'll see 2 zeros in 6 times 100. Your exponent is a 2. I have 2 tens here, and my answer of 600 has 2 zeros. Let's take a look at the next one. So the next one has the information in the middle. They're giving us 3 times 10 times 10 times 10. Well, I know that that means I have the number 3 times 10 to the 1, 2, 3 to the third power, because there are 3 tens. Again, that's the same thing as saying 3 times a 1 with 1, 2, 3 zeros, so 3 times 1,000. My product or answer is going to be 3 with 3 zeros. 1, 2, 3. Again, here's that connection. 3 zeros. My exponent's a 3. We used 3 tens. My product has 3 zeros. Take a look at the next one. All right, in this one, they only give us a 50. Well, here, with that 50, I know that I'm going to have, since I only have 1 zero, that means I'm only going to have 1 10, so it's 5 times 10. And then over using it with exponents, well, it would be 5 times, since I'm only using 1 10, 5 times 10 to the first power. All right, now in my next example, it's giving me my number in exponent form, 4 times 10 to the third power. Going to do the next, going to do these steps just like we did before. So when I go to fill in this next box, well, if my exponent is a 3, that means 3 tens. 4 times 1 10, 2 tens, 3 tens, which when I go to write my product will be a 4 with 1, 2, 3 zeros, which makes sense because this is 4 times 1,000. I know it's times 1,000 because 10 times 10 is 100. 100 times 10 is 1,000. All right, so we got one more that we're going to review right now. And it says 9 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. So let's count those tens. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means in exponent form, it's going to be 9 times 10 to the fourth power, because I'm using 4 tens. This is the same thing as saying 9 times 1, 2, 3, 4. 9 times 10,000. Again, which is the same thing as doing a 9. And then I'm going to put those 4 zeros on the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, for a final product of 90,000. Again, as I've been going through each of these examples, you should really be paying attention to those patterns those connections between when it's written with exponents, when it's written as factors of 10, as well as looking at our product. Just another slide that's going over the same example. You can see that on the top row, they had already started this problem. So you can see 300, there's those 2 zeros, which is the same thing as saying 3 times 100. Again, those 2 zeros in red, which is the same thing broken down even further as saying 3 times 10 times 10. And as an exponent, 3 times 10 to the second power. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next example. Using the information that they're giving us, well, we know that the product or final answer is 3,000. 3,000 is made up of 3 zeros, which is the same thing as saying 3 times 1,000. Well, if I have 3 zeros, that means when I go to stretch out this multiplication problem, it will be 3 times 110, 2 tens, 3 tens. If I want to use this as exponents, it's going to be 3 times 10 to the, you should have been thinking, third power. All right, one more to go on this slide. Let's take a look. So I have 30,000, and 30,000 is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. So then in this next part, that means I'm going to need to multiply it by a multiple of 10 that has 4 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is like saying 3 times 10,000. Well, if there's 4 zeros that we've used in those first 2 columns, that means there should be 4 tens in the next column. Let's check. 1 10, 2 tens, 3 tens, and 4 tens being multiplied by the digit 3. And finally, in that last box, I have 10 to the power of 4, or 10 to the 4th power. All right. So as you can see that this next slide is the exact same thing. What I want you to do is push pause on the video, go ahead in your notebook, try and write down what you think would go in these blanks. And when you're ready, come back, push play, and see if your answers match mine. All right. So hopefully you did try this in your notebook first so you can see how you did compared to what I put up here. This looks very similar. The only difference is instead of having a 3 that is shown in each of these rows, we're using 5, like 500, 5,000, and 50,000. So again, you can see in that first row, 2 zeros and 100, 2 tens used, exponent of 2. In my next row, you can see that 5,000 has 3 zeros, which is the same thing as saying 5 times 1,000. There's those 3 zeros. So in your notebook, you should have wrote 5 times 1, 2, 3 tens, which gives you in exponent form 5 times 10 to the 3rd power. And again, taking a look at the final one, let me just change colors to green here. You can see that we have 4 zeros. So in your notebook, you should have written down 5 times something with 4 zeros. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We were looking for 10,000 there. You can see that pattern continued. 1, 2, 3, 4 tens being multiplied by the 5. So the exponent form that you should have used was 5 times 10 to the 4th power. So that was the main point of today's lesson, was taking what we started on Friday and extending it using other digits to practice the same skill, looking for those patterns between standard form, writing it as powers of 10, writing it as factors of 10, and finally in exponent form, and really looking for that connection between the zeros, the amount of tens that you used, as well as the exponent.